If you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of psychology behind putting leadership into action with your team. You need to hire someone who can do the job, not that needs the job.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Seven Figure Secrets podcast. Here with Tommy Seigler and myself, Jennifer Waters. You ready for this one, Dad?
I'm ready for this one. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, so we're talking about leadership in business and making seven figures by using leadership principles. And I know you've gone really deep into this, way deeper than I have in leadership, with the John Maxwell certifications and all of that. So do you see a difference between people that have these leadership principles and are implementing them in their businesses and how successful they are versus others? Like, can you get to seven figures without having a lot of these leadership principles?
Well, let's answer that question first. There's so many different business models that you can definitely do it without per se leaning on the leadership aspect. But it's a lot of businesses use leadership, and especially the big businesses, the ones who are making 7 and 8 and 9 figures, because there was a shift from, and I think it was in the 80s. I may be a little bit wrong on that, but there was a shift. But back then, everything was about management, managing people, being able to tell people what to do, delegating things to people, and having that manager's mentality.
Right.
And then it started shifting to leadership. The shift to leadership was better because instead of, and you've heard the stories before about bosses who are, just tyrannical about people. Just bang, bang, do this, do this, do this. And, you can do it that way, obviously, because there'll be very, very successful people who've been very bad as, bosses, and they're yelling at the people, threatening the people, and doing things like that. Mm-hmm. But when you plug in and when you go from that management aspect, you still have to have management, but when you add the leadership on top of the management, then you develop influence. And that's what leadership is. And I've talked about that before. John Maxwell says leadership is influence, no more, no less. And so you put that on top of that, and that makes the business run a lot smoother because you influence people, you build relationships with people, instead of the person just being a number. And that's what makes the difference.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I know that there's obviously different ways to lead. There's different types of leadership, I guess you could say. We definitely have made a lot of leadership mistakes.
Yes.
In the past. Yes. We've hired people too fast. We've fired people too slow that have been in our organizations across our, different businesses.
Right.
And looking back now, I clearly remember there was this one girl that we hired that, man, she sounded so great, when we did the initial hiring interview. And then there were some people on our team that were like, I don't know how I feel about this, this particular girl, bring her on, because she was going to work in the new student center side of things. And I was like, yeah, but I think it's going to work out great because she has a great personality. I think what I learned out of this whole entire experience was that when you're in a hiring interview, being an optimist, and somebody who likes to change or transform or fix people, you need somebody else who's gonna look at that person and go, okay, but where are their flaws? Where are all their shortcomings? Because this girl that I hired was crazy. Like she was straight up cray.
Yeah.
And legit was crazy, saying weird crazy stuff, and had to fire her and all of that. And I'll never forget that learning curve experience. Looking back at that and knowing what you know now, where would you have advised me to be a better leader back then when it came to hiring and firing people?
Wow, let somebody else do it.
Well,
we don't do it now. We
in one of the businesses. One of the businesses we don't. Yeah.
But when you think about hiring somebody, it's easy for somebody to put on a show for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And if you hire them off of that, then like you've done before, it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So there are more probing questions. You got 3 interviews you have to do with 3 different people, kind of thing, and you get a feel for them with other people. You may have a good one interview. I really like this girl. Mm-hmm. Or I like this guy. Let's hire him. Well, let's see what the next person. They're going to ask them some different questions. They're going to tell them what we're doing, and we're going to see. So.
Yeah. So is there anything, like if somebody is out there right now, and they're trying to think about how can I be a better leader when I'm trying to hire people and find right people for the job. I don't know that I knew we needed people, and I thought I was good at being able to find people, but is there any type of steps that they need to do within themselves to be a better leader when it comes to pulling in people that are going to also match their vision?
There's always steps, and sometimes you figure them out the hard way, sometimes you never figure them out.
Yeah.
You just have to go off the seat of your pants. First impressions that we've always heard gives you the lasting impression. But I think just having multiple interviews is a good way to kind of bring them on, and having different people do those interviews and having different questions asked, because that brings out other things. First of all, I didn't know I had to interview 3 times.
Yeah.
Okay. Or someone says, I really need a job. I really need a job. I can do anything you want me to do. That's kind of a red flag, because they want the job because obviously they need the job. Maybe they got fired off a job, maybe they quit a job, they need a job. That's not necessarily the best person to hire. You need to hire someone who can do the job, not that needs the job. And usually, when people are going from one job to the next, which is a whole lot more prevalent today than it was in the past, it's easier to kind of figure out whether they're trying to just jump on real quick or whether or not. And you just have to talk with them, and you have that interview. I mean, we do interviews now on Zoom a lot.
Yeah.
Instead of having them come in, they do a Zoom interview. Or we have another way to say, all right, so I want you to send me a 2-minute video of the qualifications you have to put on this job that we put out.
Yeah, that's the first way that I do it now inside of 7-Figure Dojo. When we're bringing somebody on, there's the application. Don't send me your resume. Send me a video.
Yeah.
I want you to talk to me. And the ones that they send a canned video that they've already sent to
everybody,
50 other people, I'm like, okay, you took no effort for this job.
And any other thing, a big thing, I guess, in the questions, things, what do you know about our business?
Yeah.
What do you know about our business? And they'll go, well, I know you do this, or I know you do that. I know you teach dance, or I know you're a basketball college, or something. I know you do this service, and I'd like to be a part of it. They don't know anything because they haven't investigated what you actually do to see if, first of all, they're going to like it. Once again, they're just looking for a job.
Right. And when it comes down to leadership now, as far as how we run our companies, we run our companies with leadership completely different than we did when we just were with the one business and trying to hit 7 figures. What do you think is the fundamental difference now?
Well, the difference now is that leadership comes in, and everybody's part of leadership. I mean, literally, I pick out a book, one of John Maxwell's books or other books that are out there on leadership, and I say, we're going to study this book. We're going to read chapter by chapter on this book. And every Monday in one of our meetings, we're going to discuss what stood out to you in this book, and what ways can it benefit us as a team, and what have you learned. Now, everybody, you have people in sales, you have people in customer service, you have people doing this, you have people doing everything else. Now they're doing one thing together. Even though they're in the same building, or they're on all, like with 7-Figure Dojo, there are no buildings because it's all virtual.
Yeah, online.
Now you bring everybody together in one place to discuss something that can affect everybody, not just their department. And when you can get that across to them, it's easier for you as an owner, as an entrepreneur, to be able to get the vision across to them. You can come in and you can say, okay, our vision here is to blah, 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 do that. Okay, that's cool. And 6 months from now, you tell them that again. But if you're doing a leadership program, they're hearing it. They're learning how to become a leader because of the information that you're learning together, and they're seeing the vision and how that helps propel all of them forward. Yeah. And here's the other thing about that. You're going to have people who don't like that. Fire them.
Yeah.
They don't need to be there. They're going to fire themselves because they're not going to like the fact. And I believe unless I'm mistaken, now we tell everybody when they come in, we have a leadership program, you have to be part of that. It means you can be reading books on your own, and we're going to come in and we're going to be discussing those. We do it in our executive team, we do it in our core team, and then the individual leaders in the different departments that we have, they feed that information down to the teams, whether they're part-time or whether they're full-time, so that everybody's a part of it. They hear it just like when we teach our classes, they hear certain things all the time.
So what's changed for you since being a part of John Maxwell and
Everything.
all the leadership?
I mean, everything. It's on one of the other podcasts I talked about, when we were talking about martial arts, and we were talking about having a white belt mentality when learning scripts and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And I said what changed a lot for me as far as martial arts goes is when I started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I didn't know Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I studied Aikijitsu, which is totally different. It's a Japanese art. Brazilian jiu-jitsu was hard. It was amazing. It was like, oh my goodness, I can learn how to do this stuff. It was a whole new thing to me. I could have said, oh no, this is too hard.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do this. Now what's interesting, because about the leadership back then, I was not in the leadership as much. That's way back today.
Yeah.
And I made mistakes with the jiu-jitsu. Because I brought it back and I started teaching it immediately. Mm. The problem was, and this is where ego comes in, and I'll full circle this back to leadership. The problem was I started teaching everybody in the school jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, what I'd learned. And when they started learning submissions, they started learning how to move, they started how to do all this stuff. I had beginners that were tapping out black belts. And the black belts were going, no, I quit. Because these guys that should not be able to do this to me because I'm a black belt. I'm going, what do you mean? You ain't a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's just everybody's on the same field. Well, why didn't you teach it to us first and then teach it to them? And back then I just said, because I want everybody to learn it. So if I had to do all over again, I'd bring it in and I would work it from the top down instead of just everybody at the same time. Because not everybody learns the same way, and it was in my opinion, for me, it was an error in judgment because the black belts that we had been there for years. Now, not all of them quit. Some of them quit. They'd been there for years, and they had that relationship with me that I developed with them, and then I brought something new in. And I didn't bring it to them first, so they felt like they were slighted in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. But their ego did get in the way because not all of them quit, and the other ones that didn't quit said, "Well, it might have been a good idea if you'd have just, kind of let us learn it, and then we could help teach it, and then
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's kind of like going outside of the chain of command. Like if you, like that's hard now because we in Seven Figure Dojo. I mean, in a year we went from, I don't know, I had maybe 10 people at the beginning of 2023, right. And now at the end of 2023 we have 35ish, 40ish people, something like that. And with that massive growth, you go from having 5 to 10 people in the beginning that you're having conversations with, and they're on the ground floor, and they're doing all that, to now, you've got all these new people, you've got departments that are being formed, you've got all these other things, and so the habit could be, okay, I'm just going to tell everybody about whatever we've got to get going. Yeah. Kind of the same thing, what you did with martial arts can happen with people as they're scaling their business. Yep. And as they're growing the business. So when that comes down to leadership and knowing, all right, I need to have influence. I need to have influence with the proximity that's close to me, and then they need to have influence with that. Instead of trying to take on everybody at the same time and having that influence, that tends to make the organization stickier, right? Because you're developing a leader underneath you that's then developing a leader underneath them and kind of creating that ripple. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I am. What was the book with the military guys in it? Extreme ownership. Perfect example. Very, very down the line in there. If you were at the top of the food chain, you got it, whether it was good or bad first, and then you had to go down the line and you had to give it to the other people.
If someone's out there and they're running a 6 or 7 figure business, I think that they need to be reading, because leaders are readers. Right, exactly. And they need to be growing a ton. I think I was a little bit more on the reading side before you. Yes. Like reading and stuff. Yeah. And downloading stuff. And recently, within the last, since 2020, you're like way past me as far as all these books and things that you've been consuming and all of that. So,
well, I've narrowed things, and that's the thing. I have always, and I look back at the stuff that I did read that I like to read, and I'm not really a reader, but I am now. And even when I was a teenager, I had people who influenced me through, and this is going to sound crazy, through what I read. And I read comic books, superheroes. Yeah. They have influence over you.
Right.
They're defeating the bad guys, and you're learning lessons. And I mean, I worked in a drugstore, and we had comic books that we sold.
Pharmacy.
Yeah, it was a pharmacy. Yeah, pharmacy. I worked in there, and I could sit back there when I didn't have anything to do, and they told me, I said, "There's not a customer up there that you can serve, and you're not cleaning up or something. Sit back down and read comic books or whatever you want to study or whatever you want to do." So I did. Man, I used to read all kind of comic books. Those guys were my heroes.
That's cool.
They taught me a lot of stuff, and I got into leadership more, and that's when I realized, oh, wait a minute, Superman taught me this.
Superman taught me leadership.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you think about it. You think about Superman, Spider-Man, all these superheroes, they always had moral type of things that they dealt with, and they came up. So, yeah, I was even back then. I just didn't, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know how other things affect you till you learn more, and you go, well, yeah, I remember, like we're talking about sales on one of the podcasts, and I'm going, well, you know what? I really was an entrepreneur when I was a kid because I used to sell watermelons on the side of the road, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the leadership, reading the books and stuff is really, really good, and I picked more of that up after I became certified coach, trainer, and speaker for John Maxwell, and now my focus has narrowed as far as what I read. There are lots of things out there. This is where there's no excuse for someone not to try to expand their personal growth, because there's all kind of people out there that have influence, and there are influencers out there that have good stuff, good content out. You need to be consuming as much of it as you can.
But having the right, I'll put it this way, junk in, junk out, right? Yeah. So you've got to be diligent about what it is that you're consuming as a leader, because that's going to impact how you lead.
Yeah, I used to read lots of different books, and there's nothing wrong with any of those books because you get different ideas out of them. But now my focus is on a lot of John Maxwell's content because that's what I'm a member of. But I still read other books that correlate with that will help multiply what I already know. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when it comes down to making money in business, I believe that you've got to be able to understand the concepts, very key concepts. Number one, you need to understand marketing. You got to understand how to get your message out. Then you got to be able to understand sales. You got to be able to convert that person from just somebody that's a stranger into a customer, into a client. You got to be able to retain those customers. So in martial arts, we would call it retaining students.
Right.
And you retain the students by the thing that you're teaching and how you're teaching it. Right. And then on top of that, you've got to be able to also do those same three things, but with team members. You've got to market to find the team members. You got to sell them on your vision, and you got to retain them. In both of those areas, though, leadership is essential. You got to lead yourself in all those areas, but then you also have to lead other people. Did you find those common themes when you were trying to, learn all of this stuff too with John Maxwell?
Yeah, I did, and because it ties together. That's what's so beautiful about it. And it's just like I said a little while ago. Sometimes you have ideas about something. I wonder about that, and then someone presents something to you, and what it does, it validates what your thoughts were. You see what I mean? It validates what you were thinking, and you go, oh, so that's really now I understand it better. So when you have that leadership mentality and you're pouring it out to other people, they're going to pick up stuff that they didn't know, because you don't know what you don't. And when you learn these things, it's like learning any craft. Any skill that you have. Leadership is a skill. Anybody can learn it. Anybody can learn it. Are there born leaders? Well, everybody's born. You have to make them into a leader, right? But there are people who are born who have a tendency or lean more towards, it makes it easier for them to do leadership. Maybe they're a more outgoing person. Maybe they make friends really quick. Maybe everybody's their friend, And you have other people that aren't like that. But But the whole thing is bringing it all together and pushing it out there.
Yeah. So if somebody's got, their 6 or 7 figure business that's out there,
right,
and they're trying to think about how to apply it, like I think about how we started applying leadership and how it changed our team when we started just reading these books. I mean,
yes, because before I even did anything with John Maxwell, I was a member of Dave Ramsey's organization.
mm-hmm.
And we went through his Entree Leadership book. And that was kind of the beginning of what we went through. And that helped. It was a good book. And I love the stuff Dave Ramsey stands for. And then I went deeper into that. And I found out more about John Maxwell. And so I went through his program. And I'm still going through his program. Yeah. So, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, because it really it's hard to get people to do something new when they won't change their habit.
Yes.
And their habits start internally. And their habits are formed by their thoughts. And their thoughts are formed by how they think. So if you can change how they think, then the thoughts that they have will then dictate the habits that they do, which ultimately is going to change how your business is performing overall, because you don't have to be micromanaging people. They know how to act and respond.
Great book, As a Man Think. I can't remember the author.
Yeah.
But great book. It's an older book. It's been out there for forever. But it talks about the thought process and what you think about and how you think about it and what happens when you think about things.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of psychology behind putting leadership into action with your team.
Well, we even saw that with our team, but also that thought process, we even saw that like in my fights.
Yes, big deal, big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to just dive into that?
Sure. Jump.
What were your thoughts about that? What we did is...
Well, when you first started fighting, I'm coaching you, telling you to do this, telling you to do that. And then we had some conversations, and you say, Dad, I don't like for you to do it that way. I said, fine. I'll change the way I do it because I'm doing it a certain way, but that way wasn't for you. You had to have your own unique way.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you would come back to the corner, you said, don't ever tell me whether I'm winning or losing.
Yeah, I didn't want to know.
Don't ever tell me whether I'm winning. I don't want to know.
Yeah. So
I never did that. All I do when you come back to the corner would be to ask you, all right, where are you hurting? Are you okay? You're good, Mm-hmm. And then if you weren't or something like that, I could talk to you about it.
Yeah, like when I broke my foot.
Yeah.
And I was like, something's wrong with my foot.
you just gotta keep going.
Yeah.
You just gotta keep going. Just don't use it. Do something different.
Kick with the other one.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. You and in the heat of that moment, you had to be told, switch what you're doing. You knew what you needed to do, but you needed me to confirm what you needed to do. That's leadership. I'm going, let's use the other foot. And you trusted me, and then so you started using the other leg.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big thing. And another thing is that we did that affected how you fought was we used cues or special words.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying 1, 2, 2, 3, 5. Everybody knows the punches, right?
Right.
And some of the orders are a little different, or I'd be yelling out, kick him in the head or kick him in the body. Well, everybody's hearing that and everybody knows it. So it's like punch him in the face. Well, the other person be punching in the face, right? So we use code words to get you to do certain things, and they had no clue of what in the world was going on. And we weren't the only people do that.
Yeah.
We weren't, martial arts, fighting in general is very sophisticated, so everybody else was doing some of the same stuff. And we weren't focusing on them anyway. We were focusing on you and what you needed to do.
Right.
So those are some of the things that affected how we move forward in your evolution as a fighter.
And I think that it took a lot of leadership on me leading myself and to have enough courage to say to you,
yes,
I need something different. And then for you to then in turn not have an ego or something like that. You're like, well, you got to do it this way because I'm the leader.
Right.
And that happens a lot in business too.
It does. And that's where the leadership kind of falls, because if you're the leader, you're the boss, you're the one, then that someone brings an idea to you and you go, no, not doing that, do it the other way. Just keep doing what you're doing instead of saying, let me think about it, might be valuable. Or if you got an idea, give me some valid points, write them down. Give me some valid points. Let's look at this thing. Let's see what it's doing. But we can't deal with it right now in the heat of the moment or while the business is going on,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I definitely know that it can be super challenging if you want to please everybody, which you don't like conflict. Like, even though I love fighting, I don't necessarily like conflict.
Right.
That's not something I thrive on. It can be challenging when you have team members that are trying to bring you things that you really need to give some thought to. You want to see it happen, but maybe they don't understand the big picture of what it's supposed to look like the huge giant picture. Even if they've already got this whole leadership thing down, they don't get what the big picture is. Mm-hmm. And when there's that gap in information and they don't understand the big picture, it does take a sophisticated type of leadership to be able to go, hey, let me explain what this whole big picture is because you don't understand this, and that's why this won't work, this thing, this idea. Because if you do say no, you're going to crush that person. They're not going to come back to you. They're never going to step forward in leading.
Yes.
Because they don't understand the ins and outs of it. So multiplying your efforts as a leader is really how you can continue to grow. I mean, it's why we're growing too.
Yeah, and you have to add value to yourself. In other words, you have to grow beyond where your team is in order to lead your team where they need to go. So you have to always be moving forward. It's called the law of the lid. You're only going to be able to bring your team up to underneath where you are. And you have to get out of the way, or you have to accelerate where you go in order for them to get higher. Let's say the law of the lid is a 10. Your team is only going to be able to get to maybe an 8, maybe a 9 if it's really good. You got to move yourself on up. And that's why you can't be in the day-to-day of all of this stuff, because you have to be moving forward. You have the vision, and that vision has to be projected. You're the one who's making that vision, seeing that vision, putting the nuts and bolts to that vision, making the plans for that vision, and then you're turning around and you're telling your team about the vision. You're getting it down through the divisions about it, and then you have monthly meetings or things of that nature, so you can address everybody at the same time. Once everything has been worked down, you got to keep telling the people what your vision is, where they're going, and what benefit they're going to get out of it. Mm-hmm. Or they're not going to follow you. I was a carpenter. I was in construction for years, and I never had that in any of my jobs. None of the people who owned the company ever brought the company together and said, this is where you could be in 2 years. This is what you could be doing.
Yeah.
I had one company when I first got out of high school that did that, that with me, and said, you're going to start your job, you're going to be driving a truck, delivering the merchandise. Then we're going to move you to the warehouse so you know where everything is. Then we're going to move you to the sales counter so you can learn about sales. And it wasn't me standing there telling them stuff. It was people coming in wanting to buy stuff, and I was just selling it to them. And then we're going to move you into an office, and you're going to be a pricing clerk, learning to price everything. And then we're going to put you on sales, teach you how to sell. And you're going to go out in the community and talk to people about buying our products. And that was the only company I ever worked for that had that plan already in place. Yeah, had a whole vision. So, and that's what you have to have. You have to have a complete vision of where can you go when you start. Well, you got to take steps. We have a program. We have white belt, yellow belt, orange belt, blue belt, purple. We have all these belts. This is where you can get. This is where you want to get. You want to become a black belt. And then you want to go beyond black belt.
Yeah.
That's if you're in the martial arts. If you're doing other sports or you're doing other activities, then you have students, you have to have a vision for where they could be. In dance, maybe in ballet, maybe it's you have to be able to be good enough to be picked to be in a recital. And then we're going to go to competitions, and then we're going to compete against other people.
Yeah.
In cheerleading, they do that all the time.
Right.
But you can't put in front of your team a vision for what they can be, then they're going to get discouraged.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So everything about leadership, every aspect of it, pours into every bit of our business, I believe,
yes.
And it should in others as well.
It's been the biggest change that we've felt and that we have implemented, was making sure that everybody was plugged into the leadership aspect. And whether it's students on the floor, parents that we have come in contact with, the people who work in the program coach or success coaches or whatever, they all know this. They all are getting some of it a little bit fed to them.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks for joining us for the 7-Figure Secrets podcast.
It's been fun.
If you've not subscribed yet, do it. Make sure you get that notification bell on so you will be the first to know when a new episode is released. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Make it happen. Let's go.